A homeless elderly woman walked into a luxury restaurant and shouted at a millionaire, "Do not drink that, your wife poisoned your wine." When he arrived home early, he fell to his knees when he saw what his wife was holding in her hands. Dorothy adjusted the light blue apron around her waist, looking through the kitchen window at the flowers she had planted with such care on the small veranda. Her 60 years were gently marked by expression lines that told stories of genuine smiles, maternal concerns, and sleepless nights taking care of her family. Her hands, still firm and skilled, moved with the precision of someone who had spent decades preparing meals with love, seasoning each dish not only with spices, but with the care of a dedicated mother and wife. The aroma of the beef stew she was preparing filled the entire house, that same dish that Robert always said had been his favorite since the first years of their marriage. She checked the wall clock for the 4th time in 15 minutes, a concerned smile playing on her lips. "They always arrive at 12:30 sharp," she murmured to herself, arranging the plates on the table with her usual meticulousness. Robert must be explaining some new project to Sarah. You know how excited he gets when he has a brilliant idea. The familiar sound of Robert's car didn't arrive as expected, and Dorothy felt that pang of uneasiness that only mothers and wives know well. She had prepared the special lunch because it was the 2nd anniversary of the company that Robert had founded with such effort, and Sarah had become his right hand, showing a business intelligence that made her father proud every day. Dorothy dried her hands on the embroidered dish towel she had received from her mother so many years ago, remembering how Sarah used to play at cooking in that same kitchen when she was little. The phone rang with an insistence that cut through the afternoon silence like an icy blade, making her heart race for no apparent reason. She answered with her usual naturalness, expecting to hear Robert's loving voice announcing some traffic delay. "Hello, Dorothy speaking. Robert dear, are you all right? Lunch is ready and cooling on the table. I thought perhaps you'd stop to buy that dessert that Sarah loves." The male voice on the other end of the line was professionally controlled, but Dorothy could perceive the careful hesitation of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. The man identified himself as the physician in charge from Central Hospital, and his words began to destroy Dorothy's world brick by brick. He spoke about a traffic accident, about Robert and Sarah having been brought in serious condition, about the urgent need for her to come to the hospital immediately. The words floated in the air without making sense, as if they were directed at another person, another family, another life that certainly could not be hers. Dorothy held the phone so tightly that her fingers turned white, trying to process information that her brain refused to accept. "Doctor, please tell me they're conscious. Tell me they're going to be all right." Her voice trembled like leaves in a strong wind. "They left home laughing about some inside joke they had. They can't be hurt. They can't be. Please, tell me it's a terrible mistake." The taxi that took her to the hospital passed through the familiar places of her city, as if in a slow-motion film, each known corner now laden with an anxiety that grew with every block. Dorothy clutched her purse to her chest, repeating prayers she had learned in childhood, bargaining with God in every possible way. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, tried to make conversation to ease the tension radiating from the back seat, but Dorothy could barely respond with monosyllables. She thought of Robert, how he had woken up that morning talking excitedly about plans to expand the company, how he had kissed her forehead before leaving and said he loved her as he had on the first day. She thought of Sarah, who had called the night before to tell about a young man she had met and wanted to introduce to her parents on Sunday. "God, if you must take someone, take me instead of them," she whispered, tears beginning to blur her vision. "They have so much future ahead, so many dreams yet to fulfill. I've already lived my life. They've barely begun theirs." The hospital became a labyrinth of white corridors and disinfectant smells that haunted Dorothy from the moment she crossed the automatic doors. A young nurse with eyes full of professional compassion guided her through bureaucratic procedures that seemed absurd given the urgency of seeing her family. Dorothy answered questions about insurance and documents as if in a bad dream. Her mind focused only on getting to where Robert and Sarah were. The doctor who finally received her was an experienced man, with grey hair and the tired posture of someone who had given too much bad news throughout his career. He made her sit in a small private room, and Dorothy immediately knew that what he had to say would change her life forever. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need to be direct with you because I know you prefer the truth," he began, his hands intertwined on the table. "Your daughter Sarah suffered very serious injuries in the accident. We did everything possible, but she didn't make it. I'm sorry, but she passed away during the procedure." Dorothy's world crumbled in that moment, as if someone had removed all the foundations of her existence at once. She heard her own pleas echoing through the room, her cries of denial that seemed to come from someone else, from another mother, not her. The doctor allowed her to cry, offering tissues and gentle words that couldn't ease the searing pain tearing through her chest. When she finally managed to speak again, her first words were about Robert, about the man who had been her companion for 40 years. The doctor explained that Robert was in critical condition in the intensive care unit, connected to machines that kept his body functioning while doctors fought to stabilize his vital signs. Dorothy felt a desperate hope ignite amid the despair. If Robert survived, they would face the loss of Sarah together. "Doctor, please let me stay with him," she begged, holding the doctor's hands. 40 years married, he has never spent a night away from me. He needs to know that I am here, needs to feel that he is not alone in this fight." The 7 days that followed were the longest of Dorothy's life, each hour dragging like a cruel eternity as she kept vigil beside Robert's bed. The machines beeped constantly, creating a mechanical soundtrack for her whispered prayers and one-sided conversations with her unconscious husband. She held his rough hand, that same hand that had guided the family business with such confidence, that had stroked her face in moments of sadness, that had held Sarah's hand when she took her first steps. Dorothy talked about memories, the day they met at a graduation party, the night he proposed under the stars, the moment Sarah was born and he cried with emotion. The nurses took turns in care, and some already knew Dorothy by name, offering coffee and words of encouragement. "Robert, my love, you need to wake up," she whispered every morning as she kissed his forehead. "You can't leave me here alone after we've built everything together. Sarah is waiting for us somewhere, but I still need you here with me. We still have so much to live for, so much to remember together." The morning Robert departed began like all the others, with Dorothy waking in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, her neck aching and her heart still hopeful. She had fallen asleep for a few minutes after an all-night vigil, too exhausted to keep her eyes open. The continuous, monotonous sound of the machine woke her, and for a moment she remained confused, trying to understand what that constant beep meant. When reality hit her, Dorothy felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. The doctor entered discreetly, followed by the nurse who had become her confidant during those terrible days. They talked about procedures, about documents she needed to sign, about decisions a widow needs to make, but their words were lost in the absolute void that opened in her chest. Dorothy looked at Robert's serene face, finally at peace after days of struggle, and felt as if a part of her had also departed with him. 40 years, my love," she whispered, kissing his hand for the last time. 40 years planning to grow old together, and now I have to learn to live without half of my soul. How will I do this? How will I find the strength to continue without you and without our little girl?" The double funeral was a surreal experience, where Dorothy felt like an actress playing the role of a grieving widow in a play she couldn't comprehend. The cemetery was crowded with people, Robert's colleagues who spoke about his integrity and vision for business, neighbors who greeted her with awkward hugs and inadequate words, distant relatives who appeared only in moments like this. The priest spoke about hope and eternal life, about Robert and Sarah being in a better place, but Dorothy couldn't find comfort in his well-intentioned words. She was there physically, dressed in black, holding the damp handkerchief, receiving condolences, but her mind floated somewhere distant, where Robert still came home for lunch and Sarah still called every night to talk about work. During the burial, she held firmly the wedding photograph where the three of them smiled radiantly in happier days. "Dorothy, dear, you need to be strong now," said her sister-in-law, hugging her tightly after the ceremony. "Robert and Sarah would want you to move on and find a way to be happy again. Life still has much to offer you." But Dorothy just shook her head slowly, unable to imagine any kind of future or happiness without the two people who gave meaning to her existence. Weeks after the funerals, When Dorothy was still trying to learn how to breathe in a house too silent, the letters began to arrive like messenger ravens of a cruel reality she wasn't prepared to face. Sitting at the kitchen table where she had so often planned the future with Robert, where Sarah did her homework as a teenager, she opened envelope after envelope with trembling hands. Each letter revealed an aspect of Robert's financial life that he had kept hidden. Debts from failed investments, bank loans using the house as collateral, back taxes that had been accumulating for months. The numbers on the white pages danced before her eyes like indecipherable hieroglyphics, each representing a piece of her security that was disintegrating. Dorothy discovered that the company Robert had built with such pride had been failing for more than a year, and he had used all the family savings in a desperate attempt to save it. "How could you carry this burden alone, Robert?" she asked the empty air, her tears sprinkling the pages. "I thought we were partners in everything, that we had no secrets after all these years. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. We could have faced this together." When the first official notification from the bank arrived, Dorothy had to read it 3 times before fully understanding what was happening. An employee called to schedule a meeting, his voice professional but not insensitive to the details of her situation. On the appointed morning, Dorothy dressed in her best outfit and walked to the bank where she and Robert had maintained an account for more than 20 years. The employee was a middle-aged man, polite and patient, who received her in his office with the courtesy due to a long-time client. He explained in detail about the late mortgages, the loans Robert had taken out using the house as collateral, the interest that accumulated daily. Dorothy listened as if she were watching someone else's life, a stranger who had the misfortune to wake up in the wrong body, in the wrong life. The house where she had raised Sarah, where she had loved Robert, where every corner held precious memories, no longer belonged to her according to the documents spread out on the table. "How much time do I have to find a solution?" Dorothy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I deeply regret, Mrs. Dorothy, but the legal deadline is 60 days from the first notification," he replied, avoiding looking directly into her eyes. "I understand that it's a very difficult situation, especially after your recent losses, but unfortunately the legal process cannot be interrupted." The 60 days passed like sand slipping through Dorothy's fingers as she desperately tried to find a solution to keep the house that represented her entire life. She first sold the jewelry Robert had given her over the years. The engagement ring with a small diamond that he saved months to buy, the pearl earrings she received at Sarah's birth, the gold chain that was a family heirloom. Then it was the antique furniture, the art pieces that decorated the walls, the appliances that still worked perfectly. Dorothy walked through the increasingly empty house, each sold object taking with it a slice of her memories. The neighbors watched with curiosity and pity as strangers carried away the belongings that once made that house a home. Even selling everything, the money raised covered only a fraction of the debts Robert had left. With each passing day, Dorothy felt the ground becoming less solid beneath her feet, reality becoming more inescapable. "Robert, where did you keep the important documents?" she asked the empty rooms, searching for something, anything that could save the situation. "There must be some insurance policy, some investment that you forgot to mention. You were always so organized, always took care of everything so well." The final eviction notice arrived on a rainy autumn morning, delivered by a court officer who avoided looking directly at Dorothy when she opened the door. She held the official paper with hands that trembled uncontrollably, reading the formal words that decreed the end of her life as she knew it. She had 72 hours to leave the property, taking only the personal belongings she could carry. Dorothy walked through the empty house, her footsteps echoing strangely in the rooms stripped of furniture and memories. In the bedroom where she had slept beside Robert for 40 years, she opened the closet and found only a few clothes she hadn't been able to sell and the wedding photograph she had kept as a treasure. She sat on the cold floor where their bed once stood and held the photograph against her chest, letting the tears flow freely. "Forgive me for not being able to keep our home," she whispered to the smiling images of Robert and Sarah. "Forgive me for not being strong enough to protect what we built with so much love. Forgive me for letting everything be lost like this." On the last night in her house, Dorothy packed the few remaining belongings into an old suitcase she found in the attic. She had decided to take only the essentials, some clothes suitable for the weather, the wedding photograph, some personal documents, and Robert's wedding ring that the hospital had returned. She walked through each room one last time, touching the walls where family pictures had hung, looking through the kitchen window where she used to watch Sarah play in the yard as a child. The house was silent in a way it had never been before, not the comfortable silence of a home at night, but the absolute emptiness of an abandoned place. Dorothy locked the door for the last time and placed the key in the mailbox according to the official's instructions. On that cold autumn night, she walked through the streets she knew by heart, until she found a bench in the park where she used to stroll with Robert on Sundays. "Robert, Sarah, if you can see me from where you are, tell me how to continue," she murmured to the starry sky, hugging the suitcase against her body to keep warm. "Tell me how to start over, when there's nothing left to start with, when even memories no longer have a place to live." The following morning brought with it a reality Dorothy still struggled to accept. She needed to find a place to sleep other than the cold park bench. With the heavy suitcase in one hand and the photograph of Robert and Sarah protected inside her coat, she walked through the streets toward the public shelter a neighbor had mentioned years ago in casual conversation. The line already extended for more than 2 blocks when Dorothy arrived, a human serpent of hopelessness composed of men of all ages, women carrying small children, elderly people bent by the weight of years and circumstances. The morning sun illuminated faces marked by life on the streets, by hunger, by lack of hope, and Dorothy felt as if she were looking into a mirror of the future awaiting her. A young woman in front of her was rocking a baby who cried incessantly, whispering words of consolation that seemed directed more to herself than to the child. "Don't worry, my love, soon we'll find a warm place," the mother murmured, her own tears mixing with the baby's. "Mommy will take care of you. We'll find a way for us to get out of this terrible situation." After 4 hours waiting under the sun that gradually became scorching, Dorothy finally reached the front of the line, where a tired social worker received her with professional efficiency, but without much human warmth. The woman, who appeared to be about 40 and wore thick glasses, asked quick questions about her situation: how long she had been homeless, if she had addictions, if she possessed documents, if she had any income or family who could help. Dorothy answered each question honestly, explaining about her husband and daughter's recent deaths, about the debts she discovered, about losing the house. The social worker noted information on a form without raising her eyes, clearly accustomed to hearing similar stories of tragedy and loss. "Mrs. Dorothy, I can offer a temporary spot for 3 weeks in the women's dormitory," said the woman, stamping a paper with unnecessary force. "These are the rules. Entry at 6 p.m., exit at 6 a.m. Choose no alcohol or drugs, no visits, and keep your belongings with you at all times, because we are not responsible for theft." 3 weeks is enough time for me to get organized," Dorothy replied, trying to sound optimistic despite the tightness in her chest. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'll follow all the rules properly." The women's dormitory at the shelter was an immense hall with 20 iron beds in rows, separated only by a few meters of distance that offered the illusion of privacy. Dorothy received a thin mattress, a faded sheet, and a blanket that smelled of disinfectant mixed with the sweat of hundreds of women who had slept there before her. To her right, a woman in her 50s coughed incessantly throughout the night, a harsh sound that echoed through the hall and prevented any possibility of deep sleep. On her left, a young woman of no more than 20 cried silently every night, holding a photograph that Dorothy couldn't see clearly in the darkness. The noise was constant: snoring, whispered conversations, footsteps of those getting up to go to the bathroom, arguments that sometimes escalated until a shelter staff member came to impose order. Dorothy spent the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about her comfortable bed next to Robert, the welcoming silence of her home, the privacy she had always considered a basic right. "Robert, my love, if you could see where I'm sleeping now, your heart would break," she whispered to the photograph she always kept close. "I never imagined that one day I would sleep in a place like this, surrounded by strangers, without a little corner I could call my own." During the day, Dorothy was required to leave the shelter at 6 o'clock sharp, regardless of the weather or how she had slept the night before. The streets became her office, her living room, her universe, until nightfall. She walked without a specific destination, carrying the suitcase that seemed heavier each day, looking for places where she could sit without being expelled, trying to find clean public bathrooms where she could freshen up. The first days were the most difficult, when she still didn't know the rhythms of the city, the safe places, the times when certain areas were more tolerant of the presence of homeless people. Dorothy learned that public libraries were temporary refuges, where she could sit in silence and pretend she was reading, that some park benches were more comfortable than others, that certain commercial establishments allowed the use of their bathrooms if she bought something cheap. Hunger became a constant reality, a discomfort that grew throughout the day. Do people look at me and see a beggar, or can they still see the respectable woman I used to be? She thought, while observing the hurried passers-by who avoided eye contact. Have they completely lost the ability to see my humanity, or is there still some compassion left in this world? In the last days of her stay at the shelter, Dorothy met Sophie, a woman of about 55 who had been on the streets for more than 2 years after losing her job and being unable to pay rent. Sophie had an appearance hardened by the experiences she had lived, grey hair always tied in a tight ponytail, and eyes that seemed to have seen too much of human cruelty. She observed Dorothy for a few days before approaching, assessing whether the newcomer was someone she could trust or just another person who would quickly disappear from the streets. When they finally talked, Sophie was direct in her advice, speaking with the authority of someone who had learned the rules of survival the hard way. Listen carefully, Dorothy, because what I'm going to tell you might save your life in this cruel world, Sophie said, sitting beside her in the dormitory. First rule, don't trust anyone completely, not even me. Second rule, never show weakness or vulnerability because there are people here who will take advantage of that. Third rule, don't believe empty promises of help, because most of the time they're just nice words to make people feel better about themselves. Dorothy listened attentively, but something inside her resisted accepting such a cynical view of the world. Thank you for the advice, Sophie, but I still believe there are good people out there, she replied softly. I can't live thinking everyone is my enemy, otherwise I'll lose what's left of my humanity. When the 3 weeks at the shelter ended, the same social worker who had received Dorothy called her for a final conversation about her situation. The woman seemed even more tired than on the first day, with deep circles under her eyes and an expression of someone who had dealt with many similar cases without being able to offer real solutions. She explained that Dorothy had followed all the rules exemplarily, that she was a model guest who never caused problems, but that unfortunately the regulations did not allow stays longer than 3 weeks to give opportunity to other people who also needed help. Dorothy listened to the explanation politely, but inside she felt as if she were being pushed from one precipice to an even deeper one. The social worker offered a list of other shelters in the region, but warned that all had long waiting lists and similar time limit rules. Ms. Dorothy, I'm very sorry I can't do more for you, but the system is limited and we have much more demand than capacity, the woman said, handing her some informational papers. My advice is to look for religious organizations or charity groups. Sometimes they have different programs for people in your situation. I understand perfectly. You did what you could within the possibilities, Dorothy replied, storing the papers in her suitcase. I appreciate these 3 weeks of shelter and safety. It was more than many people have. Back on the streets with only her suitcase and determination, Dorothy discovered that the life of a homeless person was a relentless cycle of basic needs that had to be met daily, finding food, water, bathroom, safe place to rest, protection from the weather, and from ill-intentioned people. She learned that certain restaurants discarded edible food at the end of the day, but she needed to be discreet to avoid being expelled by employees or confronted by other homeless people who considered those places as their territory. Dorothy tried several times to ask for jobs in stores, offices, commercial establishments, always presenting herself in the most dignified way possible, despite wrinkled clothes and the appearance of someone who slept in the open. The responses were invariably negative, usually polite but firm, sometimes accompanied by looks of pity or discomfort. Age was an obstacle, the lack of a fixed address was another, and the absence of recent professional references made her situation even more difficult. "We're not hiring at the moment," was the most common response she received. "Leave your contact information. in case an opportunity arises, they would say, knowing Dorothy no longer even had a phone for contact. I'm sorry, but we're looking for younger people for this type of work. Sometimes someone was too honest in their refusal. My God, how did we reach the point where we treat elderly people as if they were disposable? Dorothy would ask the sky during her walks. 40 years working, raising a family, contributing to society, and now I'm seen as a burden, a problem that nobody wants to solve. Sophie became Dorothy's constant companion during the months that followed, a friendship forged by the mutual need for survival and the scarcity of trustworthy people on the streets. She taught Dorothy about the best places to find drinking water, which police officers were more tolerant, and which were more aggressive, how to recognize dangerous people and risky situations. Sophie knew the city like a living map, knew where to sleep during storms, where to warm up during cold waves, where to find organizations that distributed food or clothes on certain days of the week. Despite all her experience and apparent hardness, Sophie showed genuine care for Dorothy, recognizing in her a kindness that the streets had not yet managed to destroy. They spent long hours talking about their previous lives, about the families they lost, about the dreams they had to abandon. You're different from other people I've met here, Dorothy, Sophie said on a particularly cold afternoon, as they warmed themselves near a ventilation grate. Most people lose their humanity after a few months on the streets, become bitter, suspicious, selfish. But you still share your food, still listen to other people's problems, still believe you can help. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse in this world. Dorothy smiled sadly, thinking about her friend's words. Maybe it's both, Sophie, she replied, watching the hurried people on the sidewalks. But if I lose that, if I let bitterness take over my heart, then Robert and Sarah will have completely died, because that was what they loved most about me. During the harsh winter that followed, Dorothy faced the most difficult test of her physical and emotional endurance. The nights became a battle against the bone-chilling cold, even when she could find shelter under store marquees or beneath overpasses. Her clothes, already worn out from months on the streets, offered little protection against the low temperatures, and Dorothy frequently woke up shaking uncontrollably, with numb feet and hands cracked from the dry cold. Hunger intensified during this time, as there was less food being discarded by restaurants and fewer people willing to help on the frozen streets. Dorothy learned to save every crumb, to drink more water to trick her empty stomach, to walk constantly to keep her body warm even when she was exhausted. On several occasions, she considered giving up, simply lying down in some hidden place and letting the cold do its final work. But whenever these thoughts arose, she would look at the photograph of Robert and Sarah and find strength to carry on for one more day. You two were people who never gave up on your dreams, never bowed your heads to difficulties, she whispered to the photograph during the most difficult nights. I cannot disappoint you now. I cannot let this situation destroy everything you planted in me over all these years. On a particularly cold night at the end of winter, Dorothy was walking aimlessly through the streets of downtown, trying to find some minimally protected place to spend the night. She hadn't eaten since the previous morning, when she got some pieces of bread from a bakery that discarded expired products. Her body was weak, her legs trembled with each step, and her mind was becoming confused by the combination of hunger, cold, and extreme exhaustion. That's when she passed in front of Le Prestige restaurant, a luxury establishment she had observed several times during her walks, always wondering what it would be like to sit at a well-set table, eat a hot meal, be treated as a person worthy of respect. Through the lit windows, she could see well-dressed couples dining at tables decorated with fresh flowers, elegant waiters serving dishes that looked like works of art, a world of abundance and comfort that seemed to exist on another planet. Dorothy stopped in front of the window, not to beg or cause embarrassment, but simply to absorb some of the warmth emanating from inside and perhaps find some discarded food at the back of the establishment. How can life be so unfair, Robert? She muttered, observing a woman her age laughing cheerfully at a table. How can there be so much plenty for some and so much scarcity for others? Do these people know how fortunate they are to have a home to return to? It was then that Dorothy decided to go around the restaurant to the side, where a smaller window offered a different view of the main hall. She was discreetly looking for a trash bin or disposal area, when her gaze was captured by a scene unfolding inside the restaurant. A fair man in an expensive suit, appearing to be about 60 years old, was sitting at a reserved table talking animatedly with an elegant woman of about 55 who wore a dark blue dress and discreet but expensive jewelry. The woman smiled constantly, touched the man's arm affectionately, seemed to be his wife or longtime companion. Dorothy observed the scene with the innocent curiosity of someone peeping into a world that no longer belongs to her, when she noticed something strange in the woman's behavior. When the man turned to call the waiter, the woman quickly took something from her purse, a small vial or envelope, and with a quick and disguised movement emptied the contents into the wine glass that was in front of the man. It was such a quick and subtle gesture that Dorothy almost couldn't catch it, but she had spent months on the streets learning to observe details, to notice suspicious movements, to identify potential dangers. "My God in heaven, what did that woman just do?" Dorothy whispered to herself, pressing her face against the cold glass. "She put something in his drink, something he doesn't know is there. This can't be good." Dorothy was paralyzed for a few seconds, processing what she had witnessed and trying to decide what to do with this terrible information. She saw the woman offer the poisoned glass to the man with a sweet smile, saw him take the glass without suspecting anything, saw when he was about to bring the wine to his lips. All the experiences Dorothy had accumulated on the streets, people's distrust, human cruelty, people's capacity to do harm to each other, suddenly made sense at that moment. She immediately recognized that she was witnessing an attempted poisoning, and that within a few seconds, an innocent man could be dead or seriously injured. Dorothy knew that no one would believe her if she tried to report what she had seen. She was a homeless person, a woman with no social credibility, someone people crossed the street to avoid. Against her word would be that of an elegant, well-dressed woman who probably had social standing and financial resources. "Sophie always told me not to get involved in other people's problems, to take care of only my own survival," thought Dorothy, feeling her heart race. "But how can I stand by watching a man being poisoned? How can I turn my back and pretend I didn't see anything? If I don't do something, I'll carry this guilt for the rest of my life." Dorothy took a deep breath, feeling the cold of the glass against her forehead as she made the most important decision of her new life on the streets. She placed her trembling hand on the restaurant door handle, knowing she was about to risk everything, her safety, her dignity, perhaps even her freedom, to save the life of a complete stranger. Dorothy pushed the restaurant door with desperate force, the sound of the bell announcing her entrance echoing through the elegant environment like an emergency alarm that instantly cut through all the refined conversations. The warmth of the interior hit her like a wave, brutally contrasting with the cold of the streets that had become her reality in recent months, but she had no time to savor that temporary comfort or be intimidated by the luxury surrounding her. Her eyes quickly scanned the room for the man and woman she had seen through the window, completely ignoring the shocked looks from well-dressed patrons who paused their meals to observe this ragged intruder who completely disrupted the harmony of the sophisticated setting. The restaurant manager, an elegant man in his 40s with perfectly combed hair and an impeccable suit, immediately noticed her presence and began walking toward her with determined steps, clearly bothered by the brutal breach of protocol in his refined establishment. But none of this mattered to Dorothy at that crucial moment, as her attention was completely focused on the table where Michael was slowly raising his wine glass to his lips, completely unaware of the mortal danger he was about to ingest. "No matter what happens to me after this," thought Dorothy, gathering all the courage that remained in her body exhausted by life on the streets, "I can't let this man die when I have the power to save him, even if no one believes me." The scream that came from Dorothy's throat echoed through the restaurant with a force she didn't know she still possessed, cutting through the refined air like an emergency siren that transformed the serene environment into a scene of absolute chaos. "Don't drink that! Your wife poisoned your wine!" The words came out loaded with all the urgency and desperation Dorothy felt, each syllable pronounced with the intensity of someone who was literally trying to save a human life. The silence that followed was deafening, as if someone had pressed a pause button on the entire reality of the restaurant, freezing each person in their respective positions. Michael stopped with the glass a few inches from his lips, his eyes widening in total confusion and genuine shock. Patricia instantly turned pale, her face going through a quick sequence of expressions that lasted only fractions of a second. First, the real shock of having been discovered, then a spark of barely contained anger, and finally, the desperate simulation of innocence and fear that she knew was necessary to survive this unexpected situation. The restaurant patrons turned their heads like synchronized puppets, some leaving forks suspended in the air, others with glasses stopped halfway to their lips, all processing the explosive accusation that had just been launched in the middle of their quiet and civilized dinner. My God, what have I just done? Dorothy thought for a fraction of a second, feeling the weight of all those judgmental stares on her disheveled appearance. But I can't regret it now, not when an innocent man's life is at stake. The manager reached Dorothy with quick and determined steps, his face showing a complex mixture of professional indignation, embarrassment over the situation unfolding in his respected establishment, and the iron determination to restore order as quickly as possible. Ma'am, you need to leave immediately. This is a private establishment and you are disturbing our clients and creating a completely unacceptable situation. His voice was firm but still controlled, trained to handle difficult situations without losing the elegant composure that the environment required of all employees. He gestured discreetly to the security guards who were already beginning to move toward Dorothy. Two large and intimidating men dressed discreetly but clearly prepared to physically remove any disturber of the peace. Michael, still holding the glass in the air like a statue frozen in time, slowly raised his free hand in a gesture that made everyone instantly stop in their movements. There was something in Michael's natural authority, in the way he commanded attention without even standing up, that made even the manager hesitate in his decisive actions. "Wait a moment," said Michael, his voice loaded with cautious curiosity and an intuition that was beginning to awaken despite the bizarre situation. "Let me understand what this woman is trying to tell me before we take any hasty actions. Mr. Michael, please don't pay attention to this clearly disturbed woman," said the manager, desperately trying to regain control of the situation that was slipping through his fingers. "I'll arrange for her to be removed immediately, so she doesn't cause any more disturbances to you and your wife." Patricia quickly rose from her chair, her movement seemingly spontaneous but in fact carefully calculated, strategically positioning herself between Dorothy and Michael like a human shield blocking any direct communication between them. She managed to compose a perfect expression of vulnerability and fear that contrasted drastically with the calculating coldness Dorothy had witnessed through the window just moments before. "Michael, my love, this woman is clearly mentally unstable and we don't know what she's capable of," said Patricia, her voice convincingly trembling while she held her husband's arm with fingers that seemed to shake with genuine fear. "She could be dangerous, could be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, could be having paranoid hallucinations. Please don't encourage her by paying attention to her fantasies." Her words were carefully chosen to plant seeds of doubt in Michael's mind and everyone present, skillfully transforming Dorothy from witness to suspect, from savior to potential threat. Patricia knew exactly how to manipulate the situation in her favor, using the automatic social prejudice against homeless people as her first and most effective line of defense. Dorothy observed this masterful transformation with a mixture of horror and involuntary admiration for the woman's manipulative ability, recognizing a master manipulator in action. "She's very good at what she does," thought Dorothy, feeling the ground moving dangerously beneath her feet. "But I know exactly what I saw, and I won't let her get away with it." Dorothy took a determined step toward the table, ignoring the hands of the security guards already reaching out to stop her, her voice carrying a desperate urgency that came from the depths of her soul and her recent experience on the streets observing life's dangers. "I saw everything through the window. I was outside looking for food when I saw her take something from her purse and put it in his drink while he wasn't looking." Her words tumbled out, driven by adrenaline and the growing fear of not being able to convey the truth before being silenced by the security guards or general disbelief. It was very quick, very disguised, but I saw it. She waited for the exact moment when he was distracted looking at the waiter to do it. "Please believe me, I have absolutely nothing to gain by lying about something like this." Dorothy could physically feel the skeptical looks from everyone in the restaurant, could see on the customers' faces the natural incredulity of privileged people faced with the word of a homeless person against that of a respectable lady. But there was something in Michael's eyes that gave her a spark of hope, a flicker of doubt, a masculine intuition that was beginning to subtly question the situation. A young waiter of about 25 who had been serving Michael's table all evening watched the scene with growing discomfort, vaguely remembering having noticed something strange in Patricia's behavior minutes earlier, but unable to identify exactly what had caught his subliminal attention. "Ma'am, please calm down and stop making these serious and unfounded accusations," said the manager, nervously gesturing to the security guards. "Mr. Michael has been a respected customer of this establishment for many years, as has his wife." "That's exactly why I need to save him," shouted Dorothy, tears of frustration beginning to stream down her dirty face. "Don't you understand that sometimes those who love us most can be the ones who most want to hurt us?" Michael slowly looked at the glass in his hand, then at Dorothy, then at Patricia, his brain processing contradictory information amid the chaos that had settled in the elegant restaurant. There was something in the genuine intensity of Dorothy's desperation that deeply troubled him, a raw emotional authenticity that contrasted strangely with the surreal situation he was experiencing. Without thinking too much, perhaps out of pure nervousness caused by the situation or the pressure of all eyes focused on him, Michael made a slightly abrupt movement with his hand and ended up knocking over the glass, the wine spreading across the floor in a dark red puddle that caught the attention of everyone present in the room. "Oh my, what an embarrassing situation," exclaimed Michael, quickly getting up and looking at the mess on the floor with an expression of genuine embarrassment. "With all this confusion and tension, I ended up being completely clumsy. Patricia, can you ask for another glass for me?" Patricia observed the spilled wine for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, a strange expression difficult to interpret passing quickly across her face before she managed to regain her composure and resume her performance as a concerned wife. "Of course, my love. But perhaps it's better if we go home after all this terrible disturbance," she said, her voice carrying poorly disguised irritation that could be interpreted as natural given the circumstances. "That disturbed woman has completely ruined our romantic evening and our peace." Michael nodded distractedly, but a small part of his mind, trained by years of business experience to detect inconsistencies and lies, registered something vaguely strange in Patricia's reaction to the spilled wine, an almost imperceptible hesitation that lasted only a second, but which planted a microscopic seed of doubt in his thoughts. "You're right, dear," he responded, still discreetly observing his wife's behavior without showing his nascent suspicions. "Let's leave as soon as the police resolve this whole situation." The restaurant security guards, two large and intimidating men dressed discreetly, but clearly prepared for physical action when necessary, finally acted decisively upon receiving insistent signals from the manager, who was visibly disturbed by the prolonged disruption in his respected establishment. They approached Dorothy with professional and efficient movements, but she offered no physical resistance, only continued shouting her accusations with an emotional intensity that echoed off the elegant walls of the dining room like a desperate lament. "How you don't understand what's happening here. She tried to kill him. I saw it with my own eyes. Please, examine that broken glass on the floor. Do some chemical test. Don't let her get away with it." Her words became progressively more desperate as the security guards firmly held her by the arms with professional firmness, her screams mixing with the shocked and uncomfortable murmurs of the other clients who observed the scene as if it were a disturbing theatrical spectacle that had unexpectedly invaded their protected reality. The young waiter who had served Michael's table felt his professional conscience troubling him and timidly approached the manager, fighting against his own insecurity. "Sir, I don't want to meddle where I shouldn't, but I noticed something slightly strange about the lady at table 17 a few minutes ago," he said hesitantly, discreetly referring to Patricia. "She was fiddling with something small from her purse when Mr. Michael was distracted looking at me, and then she made some quick movement near his glass. I didn't see clearly because I was busy attending to other customers, but now that this lady is saying—" The manager cut him off abruptly, clearly not wanting to further complicate the situation that was already out of control. "Waiter, return to your work immediately and do not get involved in this." the manager said firmly, his voice laden with final authority. "We cannot give credibility to vague and unfounded speculations against respected and established clients." "But sir, what if she's telling the truth?" the young waiter bravely insisted, looking at Dorothy, who was being inexorably dragged toward the exit. "What if something terrible really happened, and we're ignoring a crime?" "Then it's not our problem to solve, it's the police's responsibility to investigate," replied the manager dryly, ending the conversation. "Our only responsibility here is to maintain order and tranquility in the restaurant, not to investigate alleged crimes." The arrival of the police transformed the refined restaurant into an improvised criminal investigation scene, with two experienced officers who immediately took professional control of the chaotic situation that had developed. The older police officer, a man in his 50s with a graying mustache and tired eyes of someone who had seen much of human nature during his career, quickly listened to the conflicting accounts from various witnesses present, while his younger partner diplomatically tried to calm the disturbed clients and restore some semblance of normality to the environment. Dorothy continued shouting her accusations, even after being handcuffed, her words becoming increasingly desperate as she realized she was rapidly losing her only chance to expose the truth before being silenced by the system. "Please, officers, I beg you to examine the wine that was spilled on the floor. Do some chemical test. She put poison in his drink. I swear on the sacred memory of my dead family." The older officer observed her with the professional patience of someone who had dealt with many strange cases over the years, but Dorothy could see in his eyes the same automatic disbelief she had faced from everyone else. Michael watched everything standing next to his table, still mentally processing the enormity of the implications of what he might have discovered about his wife, while Patricia approached him with a carefully calibrated expression of loving concern. "Michael, my love, are you all right? This disturbed woman must have left you very shaken and confused with these horrible and completely unfounded accusations," said Patricia, touching his arm with fingers that now felt strangely cold to Michael. "Perhaps we should quickly cooperate with the officers and then go home to forget this terrible night." Michael looked at her with eyes that contained a new quality she couldn't immediately identify, a subtle distance that had never existed before in all the years of marriage. "Patricia, let's do whatever is necessary to clarify this situation," he said carefully, his voice too neutral to be completely natural. "After all, we witnessed something very serious here today." The older officer led Michael and Patricia to a table away from the restaurant to collect their official statements about the incident, while Dorothy was placed in the police car outside, her pleas still echoing through the open windows. "Mr. Michael, can you tell me exactly what happened here tonight?" asked the officer, preparing his notepad. Michael reported the events in a factual and controlled manner, how a homeless woman invaded the restaurant, shouting accusations against his wife, how the situation created chaos and confusion, how he accidentally knocked over his drink during the commotion. Patricia complemented the account with her own version of events, emphasizing her shock and fear at the unfounded accusations, her concern about the woman's obvious mental instability, and her desire for justice to be done to protect other innocent customers from similar situations in the future. "Officer, this woman clearly needs psychiatric help," Patricia said in a concerned voice. "It's sad to see someone in such deplorable conditions, but we cannot allow disturbed people to terrorize respectable citizens with paranoid fantasies." The officer methodically noted everything, asking occasional clarification questions, but Dorothy could see through the car window that the official version of events was being shaped against her. After about 30 minutes collecting statements and contact information, the officers released Michael and Patricia to go home, with the promise that they would be contacted if there was a need for additional clarification during the legal process. "Thank you for your patience and cooperation," said the older officer. "We are very sorry you had to go through this unpleasant experience. We hope this woman receives the help she needs," Patricia graciously responded, demonstrating Christian compassion for the person who had just accused her of attempted murder, "and that no one else has to go through what we went through today." Michael and Patricia walked in relative silence to their car, the tension of the night weighing on them like an invisible cloud that subtly changed the dynamics of their relationship. "Patricia, let's go home," Michael finally said, his voice carrying a studied neutrality that did not go unnoticed by his wife, who was experienced in reading his emotional nuances. We need to process everything that happened today, and perhaps talk about some things. Patricia quickly agreed, relieved to finally be leaving that embarrassing and potentially dangerous situation, but a calculating part of her mind was already working on the next steps necessary to protect her long-term plans. "Yes, dear, let's go home and try to forget this horrible night," she said, forcing a tired smile. "Tomorrow everything will be back to normal, and we can laugh about how we were disturbed by a poor woman with mental problems." But as they drove through the night streets toward their home, Michael looked in the rearview mirror one last time at the restaurant being left behind, and a deep part of his intuition knew that nothing would ever be normal in his life again. During the silent journey, both were lost in their own thoughts, Michael discreetly questioning everything he thought he knew about his wife, and Patricia carefully calculating how to neutralize the potential damage caused by the unexpected intervention of that inconvenient homeless woman. "That woman risked absolutely everything to try to save me," Michael thought, his hands gripping the steering wheel more tightly than necessary. "And now she's paying the price for her honesty while I need to discover if my own wife tried to kill me." Meanwhile, at the cold and impersonal police station, Dorothy was processed through the criminal justice system with the mechanical efficiency reserved for cases considered simple and straightforward. The officer on duty, a middle-aged man with an expression of professional weariness that suggested decades of dealing with the darker aspects of human nature, filled out the necessary paperwork while patiently listening to Dorothy repeat her story for the 6th time that night. The formal charges were read to her like a social death sentence: trespassing on private property, disturbing public peace, possible attempted extortion, and threatening behavior in a commercial establishment. Each official word hammered into her consciousness, like nails being driven into the coffin of her credibility and freedom. "Ma'am, I understand that you firmly believe in what you're saying, but you need to understand how this sounds from a legal and practical standpoint," said the officer, with forced patience that barely disguised his disbelief. "So you invaded a private establishment, disturbed the public peace, made extremely serious accusations against a respectable citizen without any tangible physical evidence, and created a situation that could have resulted in violence or panic." Dorothy desperately tried to explain about her previous life, about how she had lost everything, about how she had no personal or financial motives to lie about something so serious, but she could see in the officer's tired eyes the same systematic incredulity she had faced in the restaurant, and that she would face at every instance of the justice system. "I understand your difficult personal situation, ma'am, and I sincerely regret your family losses," the officer continued mechanically, "but that doesn't give you the legal right to make unfounded accusations against innocent people or disturb peaceful commercial establishments." "Officer, please, I ask just one thing," said Dorothy, her last tears of hope running down her dirty and tired face. "Investigate that couple carefully. Keep an eye on them. That woman will try again because her plan didn't work today, and next time there might be no one around to prevent the crime." "Ma'am, you need to focus on your own serious legal problems now," replied the officer, closing the file with bureaucratic finality. "You will be processed according to the law, and I strongly suggest you seek appropriate legal assistance as soon as possible." With these final words, Dorothy was escorted to the temporary detention cell, where she would remain until her initial hearing, her last words echoing through the empty corridors of the police station. "She'll try again. Please don't let her kill him." Michael spent the entire night awake, lying next to Patricia, who slept deeply as if nothing extraordinary had happened the previous night, while his mind couldn't stop reviewing every detail of the incident at the restaurant. He kept staring at the bedroom ceiling, repeatedly analyzing the desperate words of that street woman, trying to find some logic in her apparently absurd accusation. Why would a stranger, a homeless woman who didn't know him from anywhere, risk her own freedom to make such a serious accusation against Patricia? What benefit could she have gained from that situation? As much as Michael tried to find rational reasons to dismiss Dorothy's words, something deep in his business intuition, developed through decades of evaluating people and business situations, insisted that there was something genuine in that desperation, something that deserved investigation. When the first rays of sunlight began to enter through the window, Michael made a decision that would change the course of his life. He needed to discover the truth, even if that truth was more terrible than he was prepared to face. Patricia has always had full access to our finances, he thought, watching his wife sleep peacefully. If there was any irregularity, any problem that I didn't notice, I need to find out before it's too late. The next morning, Michael waited for Patricia to leave for her usual activities, before picking up the phone and calling his accountant, a trusted man who had taken care of his personal and business finances for more than 15 years. I need you to conduct a complete and detailed audit of all my personal and business accounts for the past 2 years, Michael said, trying to keep his voice casual despite his growing anxiety. I want to see every transfer, every payment, every financial movement, no matter how small. There might be some irregularities that I haven't noticed. The accountant, accustomed to Michael's meticulous requests, immediately agreed and promised to have a preliminary report ready within 48 hours. Next, Michael called his personal lawyer, an experienced and discreet man who had handled various delicate matters over the years. I need you to discreetly investigate any unusual legal or financial activity associated with my name or my wife's name in the past 2 years, Michael carefully explained. Anything that might have gone unnoticed. Contracts I don't remember signing. Movements I didn't explicitly authorize. The lawyer, recognizing the seriousness in Michael's voice, assured complete discretion and promised to begin the investigation immediately. Michael, may I ask if there's any specific concern that prompted these requests? The lawyer questioned. For now, I'd prefer not to go into details, Michael responded diplomatically. But I ask that you treat this with maximum urgency and confidentiality. In the following 3 days, Michael tried to maintain his normal routine while anxiously awaiting the results of the investigations he had requested, discreetly observing Patricia's every movement and reaction to detect any sign of nervousness or suspicious behavior. She seemed completely normal, talking about everyday matters, planning social activities, showing the same affection and attention as always. But Michael now paid attention to details he had previously ignored: how she constantly checked her phone when she thought he wasn't looking, how she avoided discussions about finances that she had previously actively participated in, how she seemed slightly tenser when he mentioned anything related to business. When the accountant finally called with the results of the financial audit, Michael felt his stomach tighten, even before hearing the words that would confirm his worst fears. Michael, I found several very concerning inconsistencies in your accounts, the accountant said gravely. There are regular transfers to an account I couldn't identify, always in amounts just below the threshold that would require special reporting. Added together, these transfers total a substantial sum over the past 18 months. All were electronically authorized, using credentials that both you and Patricia have access to. Michael's heart raced as the accountant continued explaining the sordid details of the financial betrayal. Additionally, there are several insurance policies that were recently contracted, all with you as the beneficiary, but electronically signed by Patricia. The premiums are being paid automatically from a secondary account. How long do you estimate it would take for someone to gain full access to my finances using these irregularities? Asked Michael, his voice betraying the growing tension. Michael, with the access that these transactions demonstrate, this person already has effective control over a significant portion of your assets, the accountant responded grimly. And the insurance policies? Well, that suggests very long-term planning. The lawyer's call, which came a few hours later, confirmed Michael's worst fears and added even more sinister layers to the conspiracy that was unfolding. Michael, I discovered some very disturbing things during my investigation, said the lawyer, his voice heavy with professional concern. Your wife has been discreetly consulting various attorneys specializing in succession law over the past 6 months, always asking hypothetical questions about inheritance in cases of sudden death. Additionally, she had medical consultations about substances that can simulate natural heart attacks. Michael felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath his feet as he listened to each terrible revelation. I also discovered that she has been corresponding with a life insurance company, always asking about claim procedures and timeframes for benefit payments. Michael, these are not the actions of a wife concerned with normal financial planning. This appears to be systematic planning for... The lawyer paused, clearly reluctant to verbalize the obvious conclusion. For my death, Michael completed, the words coming out as a harsh whisper. Doctor, how solid is this evidence? Could it support a criminal investigation? Michael, individually, each item might have innocent explanations, but the combined pattern is extremely concerning, the lawyer responded carefully. I strongly recommend that you take immediate steps to protect your safety and your assets. Michael ended the call with trembling hands, finally understanding that the desperate woman in the restaurant was not only telling the truth, but possibly had saved his life from a much more elaborate and prolonged plan than he could ever imagine. Michael knew he needed to confront Patricia, but he also knew that he couldn't openly show his suspicions without giving her the opportunity to destroy evidence or accelerate any plan she might still be executing. That night, during dinner, he decided to test her reactions with seemingly innocent questions about their joint finances. Patricia, darling, I've been thinking about reorganizing our investments and perhaps revising our insurance policies, he said casually, closely watching her reaction. It might be a good idea to consult some experts and make sure we're making the best decisions for our future. Patricia stopped chewing for an almost imperceptible second, her eyes narrowing slightly before she recovered her normal expression. Why this sudden concern about insurance, my love? She asked, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Our financial plans have always worked well. Don't you think it would be better to leave things as they are? Patricia's response confirmed Michael's suspicions, but he continued feigning naturalness. It's just business prudence, dear. After that strange incident at the restaurant, I started thinking about how our life can change unexpectedly, he explained, choosing his words carefully. I want to make sure you'll be well taken care of if something happens to me. Patricia's eyes gleamed with an intensity Michael had never noticed before, an eagerness she tried to disguise as loving concern. Michael, please don't talk about morbid things like that, she said, touching his hand with fingers that now felt ice cold. Nothing is going to happen to you. I'll personally make sure that you're always safe and healthy. Thank you for the care, my love, Michael responded, discreetly withdrawing his hand. It's comforting to know that I can fully trust you to take care of me. The next morning, Michael executed his carefully crafted plan to discover where Dorothy was being held and managed to speak with her without alerting Patricia about his investigations. He informed his wife that he needed to make an urgent business trip to a nearby city, where he would meet with potential investors interested in expanding his business to new markets. It will be just a day or two, dear, but it's an important opportunity that I can't miss, he explained, deliberately packing a small suitcase with clothes and documents to make the charade convincing. The investors are very busy people and are only available on these specific days. Patricia seemed visibly relieved by the news of the trip, her shoulders relaxing from a tension that Michael only now realized existed. Of course, my love, go take care of your business, she said, kissing him on the cheek with enthusiasm that seemed exaggerated. I'll stay here taking care of everything and preparing a special surprise for when you return. Enjoy your trip and don't worry about anything at home. Michael observed the gleam in Patricia's eyes and felt a chill, understanding that she was interpreting his absence as an opportunity to execute some plan she had been preparing. After leaving home with his suitcase, Michael drove directly to the city center, where he would begin his systematic search for Dorothy in the various police stations of the region. She said she would warn me if she tried again, Michael thought, driving through the busy streets. I need to find her before Patricia has time to do anything irreversible. Michael used his business influence and political connections to accelerate his search for Dorothy, calling contacts in the judicial and police system who could help him locate where she was being held. After several hours visiting different police stations and making calls, he finally obtained the information he was looking for. Dorothy was detained at the Central Police Station, awaiting a hearing for trespassing and disturbing the public order. When Michael arrived at the police station, he introduced himself to the duty officer and requested a meeting with the detainee, explaining that he was the alleged victim of the incident and that he wished to better understand the situation before deciding whether to file a formal complaint. The officer, recognizing Michael as a respected businessman in the community, agreed to allow the meeting under supervision, but warned that the woman seemed to have mental problems and that her allegations were clearly fantastical. "Mr. Michael, I must warn you that this woman has been insisting on her version of events in an obsessive manner," said the officer, leading him to a small and austere meeting room. "She claims that your wife tried to poison you, which is obviously a delusional fantasy of someone with serious psychiatric problems. I recommend that you don't take her words seriously." Michael thanked him for the warning, but insisted that he wanted to speak with Dorothy personally, claiming that his business background would help him deal with people in difficult situations. When Dorothy was brought to the meeting room, Michael was shocked by her appearance. She was visibly more fragile and worn down than on the night at the restaurant, but her eyes still maintained that intensity and clarity that had initially impressed him. "Ma'am, my name is Michael," he said gently, sitting at the cold metal table. "I am the man from the restaurant whom you tried to warn about the danger." Dorothy stared at him for a few seconds, as if checking whether she could trust him, before speaking in a hoarse but determined voice. "You believed me, didn't you?" she asked, a tear of relief running down her dirty cheek. "You discovered that I was telling the truth about your wife." Michael confirmed with a nod, and then Dorothy began to tell her complete story, from the tragic deaths of Robert and Sarah to the loss of her home and her life on the streets, explaining every detail with a raw honesty that deeply touched Michael's heart. "I lost everything I loved in life, Mr. Michael, but I never lost my ability to recognize right from wrong," said Dorothy, her hands trembling but her voice firm. "When I saw your wife putting something in your drink, I immediately knew that I was witnessing something terrible. I couldn't stand by and let you die when I had the power to save you, even knowing that no one would believe the word of a homeless woman against that of a respectable lady." Michael listened to every word with complete attention, feeling a mixture of admiration and guilt for the courage of this woman who had sacrificed her freedom to save the life of a stranger. Dorothy described exactly what she had seen through the restaurant window, how Patricia had waited for the precise moment when he was distracted, how she had discreetly removed something from her purse, how she had quickly poured the contents into the wine glass. "It was something small that she took from her purse, Mr. Michael, something she quickly poured into the wine," explained Dorothy with details that could not have been invented. "She did it with the skill of someone who had practiced before, with calculated and precise movements. It wasn't a momentary impulse, it was a carefully executed plan. I couldn't see exactly what it was from the distance, but I clearly saw her putting something in your drink." When Dorothy finished her account, Michael knew with absolute certainty that she was telling the truth and that his own wife had really tried to kill him that night at the restaurant. "Dorothy, you saved my life by risking your own freedom," said Michael, his voice laden with genuine emotion. "Now it's my turn to help you and ensure that justice is done. Mr. Michael, please be very careful," begged Dorothy, holding his hands with surprising strength. "If she tried once, she will try again, and next time she will be more careful. People like your wife don't easily give up on their plans. They just adapt and find smarter ways to get what they want." Michael immediately arranged for Dorothy's bail payment and all the necessary legal procedures for her release, using his contacts in the judicial system to accelerate processes that would normally take days or weeks. He took her directly to the most luxurious hotel in the city, where he reserved a spacious and comfortable suite, explaining to the receptionist that Dorothy was a relative who had gone through difficulties and needed special care. "Ms. Dorothy, I want you to stay here for as long as necessary," said Michael, handing her credit cards and cash. "Order room service whenever you want, buy new clothes, rest, recover. You deserve to be treated with the dignity that was denied to you during these terrible months on the streets." Dorothy initially protested, insisting that she didn't need such generosity, but Michael was firm in his determination to properly care for her. He arranged for her to have access to medical care, a personal stylist, and anything that could help her recover her health and self-esteem after the traumas she had faced. "Dorothy, you not only saved my life, but you also opened my eyes to a terrible truth that I would never have discovered on my own," Michael explained, sitting comfortably in the armchair of the luxurious suite. "Now I need to go back home and confront my wife. But before that, I want you to give me the same wise advice you gave me when we met." Dorothy thought carefully before responding, choosing her words with the wisdom of someone who had learned about human nature through extreme suffering. "Mister Michael, watch her carefully, but don't show that you know the truth until you are completely prepared to act," Dorothy solemnly advised. "People like your wife are masters of manipulation and will do anything to protect their secrets." She will try again, but this time she will be more subtle, more careful, more difficult to detect. "Thank you for the advice, Dorothy," said Michael, rising to leave. "Stay here, rest, recover completely. Soon everything will be resolved, and your dignity will be fully restored." When Michael arrived home in the late afternoon, carrying his suitcase as if he had really returned from a business trip, Patricia greeted him at the door with a radiant smile that seemed genuinely affectionate, but that Michael could now perceive as slightly too forced. "My love, you came back earlier than expected," she exclaimed, hugging him with an enthusiasm that he would have previously interpreted as love, but now recognized as suspicious relief. "How was business? Were the investors interested in the proposal?" Michael responded with convincing details about imaginary meetings and fictitious negotiations, carefully observing Patricia's reactions as she pretended genuine interest in his supposed business successes. "Patricia, you seem more relaxed and happier than when I left," Michael casually commented, testing her reactions. "I hope you use these days to rest and take care of yourself." Patricia's eyes shone with a satisfaction that she tried to disguise, but Michael was now trained to detect these subtle nuances. "Yes, my love. I use the time to organize some things and prepare a special surprise to celebrate your return," she said, leading him toward the dining room where she had prepared an elegantly decorated table. "I prepared your favorite dish and chose a very special bottle of wine that I was saving for an important occasion." Michael felt his blood run cold as he saw the table set with 2 places, 2 crystal glasses, and a bottle of wine already opened, waiting to be served. Patricia was behaving exactly as if nothing had changed, as if she still believed he knew nothing about her deadly plans, as if she could simply continue from where she had left off on the restaurant night. "What a wonderful consideration, dear," said Michael, forcing a smile while his mind quickly calculated how to handle the dangerous situation that was developing. "You always know how to make me feel loved and well cared for." But as he watched Patricia move around the room with a confidence that seemed almost predatory, Michael understood with terrible clarity that she was already executing her next plan to kill him, and this time she would not make the same mistakes that had allowed Dorothy to discover her in the restaurant. Dorothy stood for long minutes at the entrance of the luxurious suite, simply absorbing the reality of being in a clean, safe, and welcoming environment after months of survival on the hostile streets of the city, where each day represented a struggle for basic dignity. The contrast was so brutal that she could hardly process the complete change in circumstances. From the cold and overcrowded cells of the police station, where she had been treated like a common criminal, to that sanctuary of comfort and respect that Michael had provided as recognition for her courage. The silk curtains hung elegantly from the high windows, filtering the golden afternoon light that created soft patterns on the thick carpet, while polished wooden furniture and upholstery in neutral tones created an atmosphere of serenity that dramatically contrasted with the chaos and fear that had dominated her recent existence. Dorothy walked slowly across the wide space, gently touching each surface as if to confirm that it was real, that it wasn't just another cruel dream that would wake her back to the brutal reality of cold park benches and store awnings. Fresh flowers in a crystal vase perfumed the environment with a delicate fragrance she had forgotten existed, while a basket of exotic fruits occupied the central table as a symbol of abundance that seemed to belong to another world. "Do I really deserve to be here after everything I've lost, after becoming a shadow of the person I used to be?" she asked quietly to her reflection in the window. "Or did Michael see something in me that I can no longer see myself, some value, some dignity, that survived all these months of humiliation?" The bathroom suite was a temple of marble and crystal that rivaled in size the master bedroom of the house where Dorothy had raised her family, each detail designed to provide maximum comfort and luxury to its occupants. She turned on the golden faucets of the spacious bathtub, watching fascinated as the hot water began to fill the space with aromatic steam carrying natural essences of lavender and eucalyptus, promising not just physical cleanliness, but also emotional healing. As the bathtub slowly filled, Dorothy explored the shelves filled with imported bath products, each bottle and jar representing body care she had been forced to abandon during months of extreme deprivation. There were artisanal soaps in delicate shapes, scented oils that promised to soften skin dried by the elements, shampoos and conditioners with exotic ingredients that would restore the natural shine of her damaged hair. When she finally looked at herself in the large, well-lit mirror, Dorothy confronted an image that deeply shocked her. Her tangled, lifeless hair, her thin face marked by visible signs of malnutrition and constant stress, her torn clothes that told the silent story of nights sleeping in the open and days looking for shelter. But there was something different in her eyes that she hadn't seen for a long time, a spark of hope that had been rekindled by Michael's unexpected and transformative kindness. As she entered the perfumed hot water, Dorothy felt every tense muscle in her body begin to relax for the first time since she lost her home and social identity. "Robert, Sarah, my darlings," she whispered, closing her eyes and allowing the hot water to wash away not only months of accumulated dirt, but also layers of emotional pain she carried as an invisible burden. "Did you send this good man to remind me that I still exist, that I still have value as a human being?" After the longest and most comforting bath she had taken in months, Dorothy put on the soft robe provided by the hotel and discovered with surprise and emotion that Michael had arranged not just adequate clothes, but a true complete wardrobe that demonstrated careful attention to her personal needs and preferences. There were dresses in classic cuts and soft colors that reminded her of the style she cultivated when she was still a respected lady in society, quality blouses in natural fabrics that would be comfortable and elegant, well-cut pants that offered dignity without excessive ostentation. Each piece had been chosen with sensitivity to her age and situation, avoiding both inappropriate extravagance and excessive simplicity that might sound condescending. There was also discreet but good quality lingerie, low shoes in soft leather that would be ideal for her feet that had suffered so much during months walking on the city's rough streets, and even simple accessories like a silk scarf and a small purse that would complete any outfit. Dorothy chose a navy blue dress with discreet details that vaguely resembled clothes she used to wear when she still accompanied Robert to social events, when she still had a recognized and respected identity in the community. Looking at herself in the mirror properly dressed for the first time in so long, she saw reflections of the woman she used to be, a dignified lady, a beloved wife, a dedicated mother who had built a meaningful life before everything crumbled. The clothes weren't just fabric and stitching, but symbols of restoration of her humanity, tangible reminders that she still deserved to be treated with respect and consideration. "Can I still be that person again, or is this woman in the mirror just a temporary illusion?" she asked the reflection, gently touching the soft fabric of the dress. "Michael gave me back more than clean clothes. He gave me back the possibility of recognizing myself as someone worthy of care and attention." Dorothy's first meal at the hotel became an almost spiritual experience of rediscovering the simple pleasures she had been forced to forget during months of extreme deprivation and constant humiliation. Room service brought an elaborate presentation that looked more like a culinary work of art than simply food. Creamy pumpkin soup with delicate spices served in fine porcelain bowl, artisanal bread still warm, accompanied by imported butter and homemade jams, green salad with fresh, colorful ingredients, creating an appetizing visual mosaic, and a main course of grilled salmon accompanied by seasonal vegetables prepared with techniques that enhanced their natural flavors. Dorothy ate with reverential slowness, savoring each forkful as if it were a sacred gift, her body gradually recognizing and celebrating the proper nourishment that had been denied for so long. Between each bite, she paused to observe the careful presentation of the dishes, to silently thank for the second chance she was receiving, to process the reality that someone had considered it important to ensure not only that she was fed, but that she had a pleasurable and dignifying experience. The staff member who brought the food, a friendly young woman with a genuine smile, treated her not as an indigent being helped by charity, but as a respected guest who deserved professional attention and care. "Ms. Dorothy, we have also prepared a selection of desserts and fresh fruits for whenever you wish," said the young woman with professional but warm cordiality. "The concierge is also available to help with any special needs you may have during your stay. We want to ensure you feel completely comfortable and well cared for." Dorothy felt tears of gratitude welling in her eyes at being treated with the natural courtesy reserved for people considered important. "Thank you, dear," she replied, her voice choked with the emotion of being called Mom again. "You have no idea how transformative it is to be treated as a dignified human being after so long being viewed as a social problem." Later that night, Dorothy sat in the comfortable armchair near the window, delicately holding the photograph of Robert and Sarah that she had carried with her through all the terrible months on the streets, protecting that precious image as if it were a talisman that kept alive her connection to the love she had lost. The photograph showed a specific moment that she could remember with perfect clarity, the last wedding anniversary they celebrated together, when Sarah had insisted on taking dozens of photos of the family gathered in the home garden. At that time, Dorothy had complained about her daughter's exaggeration, asking her to stop with the photographs and simply enjoy the present moment. Now, holding that worn image between her fingers, she understood Sarah's unconscious wisdom. Her daughter had created a treasure of memories that would sustain Dorothy through the darkest moments of her life. The edges of the photograph were yellowed and slightly torn from months of careful handling, but the smiles captured on paper remained intact, radiating a happiness that seemed to belong to another era, another life, another version of herself. "Sarah always said that photographs capture people's souls," Dorothy murmured, delicately tracing her daughter's face in the image. "Now I understand what she meant. You are still here with me, taking care of me through this precious memory." While Dorothy was experiencing her first night of true peace in months, Michael was in his own home, trying to process everything he had discovered about Patricia, pretending normalcy while discreetly observing her behavior during the evening's domestic activities. After arriving from his supposed business trip and being warmly welcomed by his wife, Michael had settled in the living room with some work documents spread across the table, creating the impression that he was reviewing contracts while in fact keeping full attention on Patricia's movements in the adjacent kitchen. The open floor plan of the house allowed him to observe much of her activities without appearing suspicious, especially since she had insisted that he relax while she prepared the special dinner to celebrate his successful return from business. Michael pretended to read documents, while secretly watching how she moved around the kitchen with more care and precision than usual, noticing details in her behavior that previously went unnoticed. Patricia had dressed with more care than usual for a night at home, choosing a dress he had always complimented, elaborately arranging her hair, applying makeup with almost artistic precision. All signs that this was not an ordinary night in her mind. "Darling, would you like me to play that classical music you enjoy?" she asked from the kitchen, her voice carrying an exaggerated sweetness. "I want tonight to be perfect to celebrate your business successes." "That would be wonderful, my love," Michael responded, forcing enthusiasm into his voice. "You always know how to make our dinners special." Michael continued pretending to review his work documents while observing Patricia approach a small discreet drawer near the stove, a drawer she rarely used and that he had never paid particular attention to until this crucial moment. From his position in the living room, he had a partial but sufficient view of the kitchen to see when she looked cautiously around, checking if he was really concentrated on his papers, before opening the drawer with deliberately silent movements. Michael slightly lowered his head as if focused on reading, but kept his eyes discreetly fixed on her suspicious actions. From inside the drawer, she removed a small discreet vial, the type that could easily go unnoticed among common spices and condiments, holding it in a way that kept it hidden from his line of sight. The vial was identical to the one the lawyer had mentioned in his investigation, exactly as Michael had feared to find. Patricia held the object against the light for a moment, checking its contents with the familiarity of someone who had carefully planned this moment, before discreetly tucking the vial into her apron pocket. "Michael, darling, what kind of wine would you prefer today?" she asked loudly, trying to sound casual. "I thought about opening that special bottle we've been saving for important occasions." "Anything you choose will be perfect, my love," Michael replied, keeping his eyes fixed on the papers to avoid showing that he had seen her suspicious actions. "You always have impeccable taste for these things." The tension in the house increased when Patricia began preparing the dinner table, with a meticulousness that Michael had never noticed before, each movement calculated and precise, as if she were following a carefully rehearsed mental script. She chose the finest porcelain they owned, that set inherited from Michael's mother, that was reserved only for the most special occasions, arranging each plate and utensil with perfect symmetry that demonstrated obsessive attention to detail. The crystal glasses were polished until they gleamed under the soft light of candles that she strategically lit around the dining room, creating a romantic atmosphere that under other circumstances Michael would have considered thoughtful and affectionate. Fresh flowers were arranged in a central vase, linen napkins were folded into elaborate shapes, and even the music playlist was carefully selected to include his favorite songs. Michael observed each preparation with growing apprehension, recognizing that this level of elaboration suggested something much more significant than a simple welcome home dinner. Patricia is creating the perfect setting for something she considers an important event, he thought, feeling his heart race. All these details aren't for my comfort. They're to create the perfect memory of what she intends to be our last meal together. When she finally approached the area where the drinks were kept, Michael felt his breathing become shallow. "Michael, darling, come see how beautiful the table looks," she called, her voice filled with genuine pride in her creation. "I want tonight to be unforgettable for us both." "I'm just finishing up here, my love," he responded, organizing the papers with deliberately slow movements. "I'm impressed with all the care you've taken with the preparations." Patricia's phone vibrated discreetly while she finished seasoning the sauce, and Michael pretended to be absorbed in reading a contract while observing how she quickly checked the message, her face lighting up with a satisfaction that sent chills down his spine. She typed a quick response, her fingers moving with urgent haste, before putting away the phone and resuming her culinary activities with renewed energy and visible confidence. Michael couldn't see the content of the message from his position, but Patricia's reaction suggested that she had received some information that she considered advantageous to her sinister plans. She began working with more decisive movements, arranging the final dishes with meticulous attention to detail, as if she were preparing an important presentation instead of a simple home-cooked dinner for her husband. Michael observed from the living room as she opened a second bottle of wine, this time choosing a variety that he knew was her favorite, pouring the dark red liquid into 2 crystal glasses that she carefully positioned on the dining table. The crucial moment came when she approached the glass that would be his. Patricia looked discreetly toward the living room where Michael was sitting, made sure he appeared focused on his documents, and then removed the vial from her pocket with quick and precise movements. "Michael, darling, dinner is almost ready," she called cheerfully toward the living room, her voice carrying an enthusiasm that he could now identify as falsely theatrical. "Today I prepared all your favorite dishes to celebrate your business success." Michael remained motionless for a few seconds, processing the horror of witnessing his wife actively preparing to poison him. Before responding in a voice he managed to keep surprisingly controlled. "I'm just finishing reviewing these contracts, my love," he replied, pretending to organize the papers. "I'm really looking forward to trying this special surprise that you prepared with such care." Michael knew the time had come to make a crucial decision that would determine not only his own survival, but also Patricia's fate and the course of justice for Dorothy, who had risked everything to save him from a fate that he now understood had been carefully planned for a long time. He could confront Patricia immediately, exposing his discoveries and physically preventing her from completing her murderous plan, but this could result in a violent and unpredictable situation that would put both in unnecessary danger. Alternatively, he could feign ignorance and try to capture more concrete evidence of her criminal intentions, but this would require him to put himself in mortal danger by agreeing to participate in the poisoned dinner she was preparing with such care. A third option would be to leave the house immediately and call the police, but without direct physical evidence of the poison being used, the authorities might not believe his accusations against a woman who still maintained a respectable reputation in the community. Michael thought of Dorothy, alone in the luxurious hotel but still vulnerable, trusting that he would do the right thing to expose the truth and bring justice to both of them. He thought of all the other possible future victims if Patricia managed to escape the consequences of her actions, if she were able to refine her techniques and find other victims for her elaborate and sinister plans. Dorothy told me that people like Patricia don't easily give up on their goals. He remembered the wise words of the woman who had become his unlikely savior. If I don't act now decisively and intelligently, she will try again with me or someone else, and next time there might not be a brave Dorothy to intervene. Michael breathed deeply, discreetly checking his phone to make sure he could record evidence if necessary, feeling the weight of moral responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders. It's now or never, he thought, watching Patricia make the final adjustments to the dinner that would be her final trap. I need to be smarter than her, more careful, more determined, not just to survive but to ensure that Dorothy is vindicated and that justice is finally served. Michael took a deep breath before rising from the living room armchair, carefully organizing the documents on the table, as if he had really finished working, when in fact every fiber of his being was on maximum alert for what was about to happen. He had witnessed Patricia meticulously preparing what she believed would be their last meal together, observing each calculated movement as she added the poison to what would be his glass, and now he needed to act with the precision of a consummate actor to avoid arousing suspicion. His footsteps echoed softly through the hallway leading to the dining room, each step measured and controlled, despite the tension he felt growing in his chest. He walked slowly toward the dining room, genuinely admiring the elaborately prepared table that under other circumstances he would have interpreted as a romantic gesture from a dedicated wife, but which he now recognized as the carefully constructed setting for a premeditated murder. The candles created an intimate and welcoming atmosphere, their dancing flames casting soft shadows on the dining room walls, while fresh flowers perfumed the environment with a delicate fragrance that dramatically contrasted with the morbidity of the actual situation. The fine porcelain gleamed under the soft candlelight, like precious jewels arranged with artistic precision, and the crystal glasses reflected the dancing flames as if they were cut diamonds. Patricia stood beside the table, her slightly trembling hands revealing an anxiety that she tried to disguise with a radiant smile, impeccably dressed in a gown that enhanced her mature beauty as if she were an actress prepared for her final performance. "What a wonderful table you've prepared, my love," said Michael, forcing genuine admiration into his voice as he approached to delicately kiss her cheek. "The aroma of the food is absolutely tempting, and all this elegant presentation shows how much you dedicated yourself to make this night truly special." "I spent the entire day preparing every detail especially for you, darling," Patricia replied, her voice carrying a sweetness that Michael could now identify as dangerously false. "I wanted this night to be unforgettable, a true celebration of our love and your business successes, something we will remember forever." Michael pulled out the chair for Patricia with the chivalrous gallantry he always demonstrated during their special dinners, observing how she sat gracefully while her eyes shone with an anticipation he now recognized as sinisterly expectant. He took his place at the table with deliberately natural movements, pretending not to notice how she carefully observed each of his gestures, especially when he approached the wine glass that had been carefully poisoned to ensure his death. The initial conversation flowed with apparent naturalness as they began the meal, Michael praising each dish with genuine enthusiasm for the exceptional quality of the food, even knowing that this could literally be his last supper if he failed to execute his plan with absolute perfection. Patricia spoke animatedly about various seemingly trivial subjects, but Michael noticed how she constantly checked if he was drinking the wine, how her eyes fixed on the poisoned glass whenever he raised it, how she forced smiles that couldn't completely disguise the tension radiating from every muscle in her body. The soft candlelight created plays of light and shadow that made the scene even more dramatic, while the classical music playing discreetly on the sound system provided a strangely appropriate soundtrack for what was unfolding. "Michael, darling, you seem thoughtful tonight," Patricia commented after a few minutes, leaning slightly forward like a predator assessing its prey. "I hope business isn't weighing too heavily on your mind during this special moment I've prepared for us." Michael smiled with practiced naturalness, gently touching her hand on the table. "Actually, I'm feeling surprisingly relaxed and grateful to have such a dedicated and attentive wife," he replied, observing how she reacted to the compliment with a gleam in her eyes that could be interpreted as satisfaction or something darker. Tonight is perfect, my love. Every detail demonstrates how much you care about me. I care about you more than anything in the world, said Patricia, squeezing his hand with slightly excessive force. I would do anything to secure our future together, any sacrifice necessary to protect what we've built. The conversation continued to flow naturally as they savored the main courses, Michael making sure to praise every aspect of the meal Patricia had prepared with such apparent care. She had chosen all his favorite dishes, a grilled salmon fillet with aromatic herb crust, accompanied by lightly sautéed fresh asparagus, small roasted potatoes with rosemary, and a green salad with balsamic vinaigrette that she knew he especially appreciated. The presentation of each dish demonstrated meticulous attention to visual details, as if each element had been positioned by a professional chef, creating a gastronomic experience that under other circumstances Michael would have considered memorable for the right reasons. "Patricia, this salmon is absolutely perfect," he commented, genuinely savoring the exceptional quality of the food. "The seasoning is impeccably balanced, and it's cooked exactly as I prefer. You've really outdone yourself tonight." Patricia smiled with genuine pride for the first time that night, clearly satisfied with the recognition of her culinary skills. "I learned that special cooking technique by watching that cooking show we used to watch together," she explained, momentarily appearing relaxed. "I practiced several times until I got it exactly the way you like it." Michael continued praising every aspect of the meal, but noticed how Patricia repeatedly turned her attention to the wine glass that remained untouched in his hands. "Michael, darling, you've barely touched your wine," she finally commented, her voice carrying a concern that tried to sound casual. "It's a very special vintage that I chose specifically for this occasion. It cost a fortune, but I wanted something truly exceptional to celebrate." Michael picked up the glass and pretended to appreciatively smell it, noticing how Patricia leaned slightly forward in poorly disguised anticipation. "You're right, my love, the aroma is truly extraordinary," he replied, raising the glass as if to make a toast. "How about we toast to our future together and all the surprises it may bring?" "Perfect," Patricia quickly said, picking up her own glass with hands that trembled slightly with anxious expectation. "To our future and all the wonderful changes to come." The crucial moment came when the oven timer suddenly sounded, interrupting the toast that was about to happen, and providing Michael with the perfect opportunity he had been waiting for to execute his self-preservation plan. The sharp sound cut through the air like an emergency alarm, causing Patricia to jump slightly in her chair before she realized what was happening. "The special side dish I prepared is ready," she exclaimed, quickly rising from the table with an expression of culinary satisfaction that masked her obvious frustration at being interrupted at the exact moment Michael was about to ingest the poison. "It'll just take a minute for me to get it from the kitchen, darling. Please keep your glass in hand so we can make our toast when I return." Michael watched Patricia hurriedly head to the kitchen, her movements revealing poorly contained anxiety at the unexpected interruption, and the moment she completely disappeared from his line of sight, he executed the most important move of his life. With speed and precision he didn't know he possessed, he switched the positions of the two wine glasses on the table, ensuring that Patricia would drink the poison she had specifically prepared for him. His movements were quick but careful, avoiding spilling any drop of the deadly liquid, while making the exchange that would save his life and seal the fate of his murderous wife. He slightly adjusted the candles and moved the flower arrangement a few inches to disguise any evidence that he had tampered with the table setting, making sure everything looked exactly as she had left it before going to the kitchen. Michael even checked if he hadn't left fingerprints or other signs that he had manipulated the glasses, discreetly wiping away any marks he might have left. When Patricia returned a few minutes later, carrying a platter of roasted vegetables that exuded a delicious aroma and looked as if they had been prepared by a professional chef, Michael was already sitting normally in his chair, with the glass naturally positioned in his hand as if nothing had happened. "Sorry for the unexpected interruption, my love," she said, carefully placing the platter on the table and returning to her place with elegance. "Now we can finally make our toast properly and celebrate this special night." "Don't worry, darling," Michael replied, carefully observing how she picked up the poisoned glass without suspecting absolutely nothing. "I'm really looking forward to toasting with you, and celebrating this wonderful night that you prepared with such care and dedication." Patricia raised her glass with a radiant smile that revealed her anticipated satisfaction with the success of her sinister plan, completely unaware that she was about to become the victim of her own elaborately planned murderous scheme. "To the truth," said Michael, choosing his words with deliberate care as he raised his own glass, closely observing every nuance of Patricia's reaction. "To truth and justice, which always find a way to prevail in the end, even when we least expect it." Patricia hesitated for a fraction of a second, a shadow of confusion quickly passing over her perfectly made-up face before she regained her composure and agreed to the seemingly innocent toast. "To the truth," she repeated with a slightly forced voice, touching her glass to his with a crystalline sound that echoed through the dining room like a funeral bell ringing to announce her own fate. Both drank simultaneously, Michael taking only a symbolic sip of his safe wine, while watching Patricia drain a substantial amount of the drink she herself had poisoned. The first 15 minutes after the toast passed with apparent normality, Patricia speaking animatedly about her elaborate plans to redecorate the house next month, about a romantic trip she would like to take to Europe, about social changes she wanted to implement in their weekly routines. Michael listened to her with a calmness that she interpreted as post-trip relaxation, but which was actually the profound serenity of someone who knew that justice was finally being done after such a long time of deception. "Michael, you seem more relaxed and confident tonight," she commented, unconsciously serving herself more poisoned wine. "The business trip must have been really productive and successful to leave you so serene and satisfied." "Yes, it was an extremely revealing and enlightening trip," he replied, choosing each word carefully. "I learned very important things about people I trust, about true loyalty, about the real nature of truth and justice." Patricia nodded distractedly, clearly more concerned with observing whether Michael continued drinking than with actually listening to what he was saying. "That's good, darling. You deserve all the success in the world," she said, her words sounding slightly empty and automatic. Gradually, over the next 20 minutes, Patricia began to show subtle but unmistakable signs of discomfort that she initially tried to disguise as simple, natural fatigue at the end of the day, but which quickly intensified into something more alarming that could no longer be ignored or minimized. Her skin began to acquire a pallor that dramatically contrasted with her carefully applied makeup. Small drops of sweat began to appear on her forehead despite the perfectly comfortable temperature of the room, and her motor coordination began to fail almost imperceptibly when she tried to handle utensils or bring food to her mouth. "Are you feeling well, my love?" asked Michael with carefully feigned concern, observing how she placed the glass back on the table with visibly trembling hands. "You look a bit pale and tired." Patricia tried to force a reassuring smile and minimize her growing symptoms, but her voice was already slightly hoarse and distorted when she answered, "It must just be natural tiredness from the busy day I had preparing all these special details for you," she said, but Michael could clearly see the panic beginning to form in her eyes as she realized that something was drastically wrong with her body. A few minutes later, she could no longer maintain the facade of normality she had sustained throughout the night. Her hands trembled visibly when she tried to pick up the fork. Her breathing was becoming slightly irregular, and her skin had acquired a tone that was clearly not natural. "Michael," she said, her voice now laden with genuine concern and growing panic, "I really am not feeling very well. There's something very strange happening to me." She stopped speaking abruptly, her eyes widening in growing horror as a terrible suspicion began to form in her mind, connecting the dots between her symptoms and what she had done to the wine. "What did you put in the wine?" asked Michael, his voice maintaining a calm but firm tone as he watched her struggle against the progressive effects of the toxic substance. Or better asking, "What did you put in my wine, Patricia?" Patricia remained completely still for a few long and tense seconds, processing the terrifying implications of Michael's words before trying to rise from the chair in desperate panic, only to discover that her legs did not adequately respond to the urgent commands of her brain. The full realization of what had happened hit Patricia like a devastating lightning bolt, and she looked at Michael with an explosive mixture of absolute terror, impotent rage, and total disbelief that completely transformed her facial expression. You switched the glasses," she murmured, her voice now weak and progressively distorted by the relentless effects of the poison she herself had prepared. "How did you know what I was planning? How did you discover my plans?" Michael remained calmly seated in his chair, watching his wife desperately struggle against the effects of the substance she had meticulously prepared to kill him, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction for justice finally being done and deep sadness for the complete destruction of what he had once sincerely believed to be a marriage based on true love and mutual trust. "An extraordinarily brave and honest woman warned me about your true murderous nature," he said, his voice carrying a coldness that Patricia had never heard before in all the years of marriage. A woman who lost absolutely everything in life, but who still had enough moral courage and integrity to risk her own freedom to save the life of a complete stranger. Patricia desperately tried to speak, tried to defend herself with arguments, tried to find a convincing explanation that could reverse the terrible situation, but her ability to articulate words was rapidly deteriorating along with her general physical coordination. "You tried to murder me twice," continued Michael, calmly rising from the table and walking around her like a judge pronouncing a final sentence. "The first time at the restaurant, when a desperate homeless woman demonstrated more moral integrity and courage than my own wife. And this second time, when you thought you had eliminated the only witness to your horrible crimes." He stopped directly in front of her, observing how she desperately clung to the table to avoid falling from the chair. "But you severely underestimated both that extraordinary woman and me. She taught me a valuable lesson, that truly evil people never easily give up their sinister plans. They just patiently wait for a better opportunity to execute them." Michael leaned slightly to be at eye level with her. "And you, my dear wife, have just given me the perfect opportunity to ensure that justice is finally done." Michael calmly walked to the landline phone in the room and dialed the emergency number, speaking with the natural and controlled authority of someone who was completely prepared for that moment for several days. "I need to report an attempted homicide at my residence," he told the emergency operator, providing his complete address and clearly explaining that his wife had tried to poison him but ended up accidentally ingesting the toxic substance. "She needs immediate emergency medical attention, and I have substantial evidence that this is part of an established pattern of criminal behavior." While waiting for the arrival of the proper authorities, Michael called his personal attorney, waking him in the middle of the night to explain that the moment had finally come to gather all the meticulously collected evidence during the investigations of the past few days. "Doctor, it's time to expose the whole truth about Patricia," he said on the phone, keeping his voice low so she couldn't hear the details. "Patricia has finally completely revealed herself, and now we have the unique opportunity to ensure that Dorothy is completely exonerated and that justice is definitely done." Patricia was now clearly incapacitated, slowly sliding from her elegant chair to the cold floor of the dining room, her breathing becoming progressively more laborious and irregular. Michael didn't feel genuine compassion for her at that moment, but he also didn't experience sadistic pleasure in her agony, just a deep sense of closure that a terrible and traumatic chapter of his life was finally ending. When the sirens began to sound distantly in the night, Michael knelt beside Patricia and calmly whispered in her ear, "The brave woman you tried to destroy will be free today, and you will face all the consequences of your criminal choices. Justice took a long time to arrive, but it finally has." You cannot prove absolutely anything," muttered Patricia with extreme difficulty, still desperately trying to find a legal way out, even in her critical state. "It will be my word against that of a disturbed and crazy homeless woman." "Actually," replied Michael, discreetly showing her his cell phone, "I recorded our entire conversation tonight, including your implicit confession when I asked about the poison in the wine. Can I have conclusive financial evidence, extremely suspicious medical consultations, and Dorothy's detailed testimony about the first murder attempt at the restaurant?" The simultaneous arrival of paramedics and police quickly transformed Michael's elegant house into an active and complex crime scene, with highly trained professionals taking complete control of the situation, while Michael provided a detailed, organized, and completely honest account of the events that had led to that culminating moment. Patricia was immediately placed on an emergency stretcher and rapidly transported to the hospital under strict police guard, receiving intensive medical treatment that might possibly save her life, but would certainly not save her from the serious legal consequences of her criminal actions. The detective responsible for the case, an experienced man with decades of criminal investigation, listened attentively and took meticulous notes while Michael explained the entire complex sequence of events. The private financial investigation that revealed highly suspicious irregularities, the secret medical consultations about toxic substances, the dramatic incident at the restaurant. "Mr. Michael, these are extremely serious accusations with serious criminal implications," said the detective, filling out official forms. "We will need to thoroughly examine all physical evidence, including complete toxicological analysis of the contents of the glasses, conduct comprehensive medical examinations, and collect detailed statements from all parties involved in this complex case." Michael voluntarily handed over all documents he had collected during his extensive private investigation, including the detailed financial reports from his accountant, the legal findings of his lawyer about Patricia's suspicious activities, and even the digital audio recording he had discreetly made during dinner. "Detective, there is a completely innocent woman unjustly imprisoned for trying to save my life," Michael said with controlled urgency. "Dorothy is being held for trespassing and disturbing the peace, but she is the true heroine of this entire story. Without her extraordinary courage and personal sacrifice, I would be dead right now." The detective professionally assured that Dorothy's legal situation would be immediately reviewed in light of the substantial new evidence and that all necessary procedures would be rigorously followed to ensure that justice was properly served for both victims and perpetrators. "Sir, based on what you're reporting to me and the preliminary evidence I'm observing, it appears we have a very solid case of premeditated attempted murder with aggravating circumstances," said the officer with authority. "Your wife will face very serious criminal charges, and Miss Dorothy will be released as soon as we process all the necessary paperwork." Weeks after the trial that had shocked the entire local community, Dorothy was finally in a modest but extraordinarily cozy apartment that Michael had personally and carefully chosen in a quiet and extremely safe neighborhood of the city, a true home that represented not just basic physical shelter, but the complete and definitive restoration of her fundamental human dignity. The apartment had 2 spacious bedrooms, a comfortable and well-lit living room with large windows that allowed abundant natural light throughout the day, a fully functional and well-equipped kitchen where she could prepare her own nutritious meals with always fresh ingredients, and even a charming small balcony where she had enthusiastically begun to cultivate colorful. The walls were professionally painted in warm and welcoming tones that created a permanent atmosphere of peace and serenity, completely different from the hostile and desperate environments where she had been forced to seek shelter during the traumatic months on the streets. But what made that space truly and deeply special were the carefully and artistically framed photographs that Michael had commissioned to be professionally printed, enlarged, and restored. Precious images of Robert smiling radiantly on various memorable occasions throughout their happy years together, loving photos of Sarah from her innocent childhood to her promising adulthood. Michael had hired a specialized professional photographer to digitally restore each damaged image, carefully enhancing the original faded colors and meticulously repairing the tears and stains caused by months of exposure to urban weather. "Lady Dorothy," said Michael when he first brought her to see the fully prepared apartment, "I want this place to be truly and permanently your home, not just a temporary favor or charity, but a place where you can rebuild your entire life with absolute security and complete dignity." Dorothy walked emotionally through the rooms, delicately touching each carefully prepared surface, admiring each meticulously planned detail, but mostly observing with tears of gratitude the restored photographs of her family that now occupied places of special honor on the walls. "Michael, this is infinitely more than I could have ever dreamed or hoped for," she said, tears of genuine gratitude flowing freely down her face. "You haven't just given me a roof over my head, but completely returned my lost identity, my most precious memories, my spiritual connection with the people I loved more than anything." Michael explained in detail the comprehensive financial arrangements he had permanently established to ensure Dorothy's long-term security, clearly demonstrating that his generosity was not a temporary emotional impulse, but a permanent and irrevocable legal commitment to her complete well-being. Dorothy, I have established a substantial and legally protected trust fund that will cover absolutely all your expenses for housing, nutritious food, adequate clothing, specialized medical care, and personal needs for the rest of your natural life, he patiently explained, showing her all the official legal documents that permanently guaranteed her financial security. Additionally, you will receive a generous monthly pension that will allow you to live with genuine comfort and absolute dignity without ever having to worry about basic needs or depend on the uncertain charity of other people. Dorothy initially tried to protest that it was excessively generous, that she didn't deserve such extraordinary kindness, but Michael was absolutely firm in his unwavering determination to completely honor the profound moral debt he felt he owed her. "How you saved my life by courageously risking your own freedom and personal safety," he said, gently holding her hands, trembling with emotion. "You taught me fundamental lessons about genuine moral courage, about doing the right thing, even when it would cost absolutely everything. How can I truly value my own life if I don't ensure that the extraordinary person who saved it has every opportunity to live with complete dignity?" He had also arranged comprehensive and specialized medical care to help Dorothy fully recover from the profound physical and emotional traumas of her desperate months on the streets, including restorative dental treatment, specialized dermatological care, personalized nutritional therapy, and especially professional psychological support to help her properly process her devastating losses and gradually rebuild her damaged self-esteem. "Michael, why are you doing absolutely everything for me?" asked Dorothy, her voice completely choked with emotional overwhelm. "I was just a desperate and disturbed beggar who invaded an elegant restaurant shouting accusations that nobody wanted to believe." "Dorothy," Michael replied, looking directly and intensely into her eyes, "you gave me back my life when you had every reason in the world to worry exclusively about your own desperate survival. Now it's definitely my turn to give your dignified life back to you, to ensure you have every opportunity to rediscover genuine happiness and real purpose." 6 months after the widely media-covered trial, Patricia was sitting in a small, austere and cold cell in the state penitentiary, where she was serving a rigorous 15-year sentence for premeditated attempted murder, systematic financial fraud, and deliberate falsification of official documents. The trial had transformed into a case that deeply shocked the entire community through the devastating revelation of how an apparently respectable and socially well-positioned woman had coldly and systematically planned to murder her own husband for purely financial and greedy motives. The evidence presented methodically by the public prosecutor had been absolutely overwhelming and irrefutable. Crystal-clear audio recordings of Patricia's implicit confessions, scientific toxicological reports unequivocally confirming the presence of lethal substances in her system, meticulous financial records detailing her systematic embezzlement, and especially the courageous and detailed testimony of Dorothy, who was respectfully. Patricia had lost not only her personal freedom, but also all of her accumulated material possessions, which were completely legally confiscated to pay substantial restitution and criminal fines, leaving her absolutely without financial resources or any kind of social support. The permanent and irreversible effects of the poison she had ingested left lasting physical marks on her health, including significant neurological damage that permanently affected her motor coordination and chronic liver problems that required expensive and constant medication. Even more devastating were the brutal psychological effects of her complete social downfall. From a privileged position of social respect and financial security to the brutal and relentless reality of prison, where she was just another common criminal without special status or protection of any kind. She spent her monotonous days in a rigid routine of forced labor, in the prison's dirty laundry, simple and tasteless meals in the noisy cafeteria, and long hours of oppressive solitude in her tiny cell, bitterly reflecting on the destructive choices that had led her to that desperate and hopeless situation. "How did I allow it to reach this terrible point?" she frequently asked herself, observing through the bars of the small, dirty window of her cell. "How did I allow blind greed and destructive arrogance to completely and irreversibly destroy my entire life?" But the genuine answers to these questions remained frustratingly and eternally elusive, lost in a complex psychological labyrinth of defensive self-rationalization and absolute denial that she had meticulously constructed over the years. On the night that marked exactly 1 year since the restaurant incident, Dorothy was sitting in her favorite armchair in the apartment she now called home, holding the restored photograph of Robert and Sarah. The image had been masterfully restored by a professional photographer with vibrant colors that made the beloved faces seem alive again. Beside the original photograph, there was a new image, Dorothy smiling on her first day in the apartment, showing a woman who had rediscovered her dignity and purpose. Her hair was well groomed and her eyes shone with renewed vitality. For the first time in years, Dorothy was not alone. She had a support community that included friendly neighbors, dedicated health professionals, and especially Michael, who had become a true friend. "Robert, Sarah, my darlings," she whispered to the photographs as she did every night, "can you see how my life has changed? How the kindness of a good man brought me back from the abyss?" She touched the frames, feeling a spiritual connection with her family that had strengthened through her journey of suffering and redemption. Dorothy got up and walked to the window of her apartment, observing the lights of the city that had once been a place of terror, but now represented possibilities and renewed hope. She thought about all the people who were still on the streets, facing the same challenges she had overcome. With the financial security that Michael had provided, Dorothy had begun to volunteer at local shelters, sharing her experience and offering hope to others in desperate situations. "Every time you do the right thing," she said quietly, repeating the words that had become her mantra, "even if the world counts it against you, you plant a seed of kindness that will one day grow into something greater than you can imagine." She thought of Michael, who had chosen to transform his traumatic experience into an opportunity to do good. "Kindness always finds a way to multiply," she murmured, watching the stars in the night sky. "And truth always finds a way to prevail, even when it takes a long time." For the first time since the death of Robert and Sarah, Dorothy felt that her life had purpose again. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, "for reminding me that kindness and truth still matter, that doing the right thing is always worth it." Did you like Dorothy and Michael's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there and I'll be waiting for you.